I'm Rabbi Mike Urim. My job is to create Jewish learning and Jewish growth experiences. The theory is that in order to build flourishing Jewish communities, an essential key is to help nurture the why. There are a lot of places you can go to learn about the history of Israel and Zionism, but why is this one different? One of the things that will make this course different is that I'm bringing with me 17 years of Hillel and campus experience. This means a few things for you. It means that as a former Hillel director, I spent years speaking with right-wing Zionists, progressive Zionists, as well as thousands of students who didn't see their views on Israel as a core part of their identity or political activity. I spent years talking with different faculty and different religious and ethnic groups on this issue. And through it all, I even spent time talking with students who are anti-Zionist. Part of what makes campus so interesting is that all of these different groups are interconnected in a way that adult communities just aren't. The second thing that I bring with me from campus is a deep commitment to pluralism and to teaching people of every different background and level of knowledge about this subject. All of this is to say that I've heard and seen almost everything with regards to Israel and Zionism, and I hope that that makes me a safe, honest, and patient source of information on the subject. Finally, I've always found myself more in the educational headspace than in the advocacy headspace. What I mean by this is that I tend to be more curious and interested in ideas than I am in winning an argument. In my own journey, I have struggled at times to cut through all of the noise and talking points. It sometimes feels like there are countless opinions, but it is very hard to actually find facts. I remember many years ago during a slow summer on campus, I set out to try to understand what really happened in the 1948-49 war. I was constantly hearing narratives that seemed irreconcilable. On the one hand, I'd encounter versions of history that made Israel seem like the most perfect and most ideologically pure country that had ever fought a war. And on the other hand, I'd find countless opinions that portrayed Israel as the most merciless and brutal country that could ever have existed. So that summer, I started to do a deep dive to find out the facts that were underneath all of these different talking points. I probably read 14 books that summer and a dozen or more articles with different perspectives and different approaches. In doing so, I started to get a better sense of how to understand which sources were trying to find the truth and which sources were interested in propping up their own particular political narrative. Over time, these biases became easier to spot. First, you could look at how the book was dedicated. If an author chose to dedicate the book to one side of the conflict, you knew there was a bias. Second, I could tell by the language that was being used. If the author used a lot of buzzwords or resorted to hostile language rather than analysis, you could tell there was a bias. I could also see that when historians only relied on personal interviews rather than mixing interviews with third-party documentary evidence. In the end, what I found again and again is that the story of Israel and Zionism is complex and nuanced, and that any source that tried to reduce it to something simple just wasn't being intellectually honest. This leads us to a core value we hope to maintain throughout this course, to always value complexity over simplicity. As I've traveled around North America teaching this course to different groups, they all seem to be asking questions with the same through line. Everybody wants to know who is right and who's wrong, who's the hero and who's the villain. This is also how the majority of media outlets have covered this conflict for decades. And over time, we've internalized it. And yet, the simple narrative just isn't enough to really grasp what's going on. Embracing complexity over simplicity is actually a very deep Jewish value. There is a beautiful midrash, a rabbinic commentary, where he teaches that when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, that even the Torah, the document the rabbis imagined as representing divine truth, was not simple. Rather, Moses was taught 49 reasons why something was forbidden and 49 reasons why it was permitted. For short, we often call this the 49 by 49. There are many ways to understand each side of something. The text does not use one of the normal words for reasons. Rather, it says that there are 49 faces on every side of an issue. They're not just facts, not just political positions on a given issue, but they're faces, people's lives and experiences. All of this is more complex than the simple binary choices politics or the media present us with. We are all more complex than being pro or anti a given issue that we care about, and it can't be solved by simply choosing one side or by repeating simple slogans. In order to make the world better and to solve complicated issues, we need deep and nuanced understandings. So the goal of our time together is to avoid simple answers and instead to work together to find the facts underneath all the talking points. Sometimes these will be facts we agree with, facts that reinforce the political views we already have. But other times, the facts will challenge our pre-existing notions and maybe even make us a little bit uncomfortable. That's okay. We're looking for something called productive discomfort. And I'm going to try my very best to present the information in a way that is right down the middle and that resists any pre-existing ideological views that I might have. That said, I'm a human being and I'm Jewish and I have my own personal and familial relationship with Israel and the people of Israel. So even while we strive for a perfect kind of balance, I will inevitably fail to get this right. But there is a value in creating a space to learn where we're trying our very best to be intellectually honest and to be as neutral as possible. It is nearly impossible to utter a word about this part of the world that doesn't have some political implication or run the risk of offending or triggering someone. Here are just a few examples. Do we call the 1948 war the War of Independence, or the Nakba, the Arabic word for this war meaning catastrophe often used by Israel detractors? Do we call it the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, the occupied territories, or Palestine? What do we call the Arab citizens of the State of Israel? Are they Israeli Arabs or Palestinian Israelis? Each of these choices of words suggests a different political orientation and narrative, a different view of who's right and who's wrong. We'll do our best to choose the words and terms that get as close to neutral as possible, knowing that we might never find a term that really gets us there. And we will unpack some of what these terms imply when time allows. Making this challenge even more difficult is the fact that the meaning of important words has changed over time. For example, a settler in 1950 was a Jewish person living in a new town inside the internationally recognized borders of Israel. But in 2024, a settler is someone living in a town in the West Bank, a territory most international bodies don't recognize as officially part of Israel. Throughout this course, we will dive deeper into this sort of complexity. We will also explore other terms related to the region, terms like colonialism, apartheid, racism, and genocide. So please join us on this journey. In the next chapter, we will get grounded with some of the basic facts and figures and maps that we'll need to understand before moving into the history.